Crotus and Bia drag Prometheus to a desolate mountain in the Caucasus, with Hephaestus following closely behind. Crotus announces that, by order of Zeus, Prometheus must be chained to the rock as punishment for his defiance, giving fire to humanity. His suffering is meant to break his loyalty to mortals and force him into submission to Zeus. Hephaestus, tasked with binding Prometheus, hesitates. Though he must obey, he laments the cruelty of punishing a fellow god. Yet the command is absolute. Prometheus has stolen fire from Olympus and unjustly gifted it to mortals. His punishment will last for ages, as the one destined to free him has not yet been born. Hephaestus warns that Zeus's wrath is unyielding, like that of all new rulers, and that Prometheus will find no mercy for a long time. Crotus urges Hephaestus to proceed, questioning why he hesitates to punish the enemy of the gods. Hephaestus protests that he and Prometheus are bound by friendship, but Crotus dismisses such sentiment. Zeus's will is supreme. Hephaestus bitterly mourns his role in this task, accusing Crotus of being ruthless. Crotus remains unmoved, stating that Prometheus alone is responsible for his fate. Mercy is pointless, and disobedience to Zeus is dangerous. When the final chains are secured, Crotus mocks Prometheus for aiding humanity, reminding him that mortals can do nothing to save him now. With their duty fulfilled, Hephaestus, Crotus, and Bia depart. Left alone, Prometheus calls upon nature itself to witness his torment at the hands of his fellow gods, particularly Zeus, the new ruler of Olympus. He wonders aloud how long his suffering will last, but quickly reminds himself that he already knows his fate. Nothing that happens will be a surprise, only endurance remains. He repeats the charge against him. He gave fire to humankind, teaching them all the arts. Suddenly, the sound of wings echoes through the air. Alarmed, Prometheus questions what approaches, dreading whatever may come next. The names of Crotus and Bia are not arbitrary. Crotus means force or might in ancient Greek, while Bia translates to violence. Greek mythology often personifies abstract concepts and natural forces as deities, but in Aeschylus's play, these names serve a greater poetic function. Zeus himself never appears on stage, though he is frequently invoked. This absence may be due to theatrical conventions that restricted the portrayal of the greatest of the gods. Instead, Zeus rules from a distance, acting through his agents, force and violence. Their very presence signals the nature of Zeus's reign, one maintained through sheer brutality. An unusual aspect of the opening scene is that only two of the four characters, Crotus and Hephaestus, speak. Bia remains silent, presumably because her words would echo those of Crotus. Prometheus, though directly addressed, also remains mute. This choice simplifies the scene, keeping the focus on Zeus's servants and their perception of Prometheus before he himself speaks. It also establishes Prometheus's steadfastness. His silence in the face of his oppressors unders his defiance. The contrast between Crotus and Hephaestus further deepens the drama. While both must obey Zeus, Hephaestus does so reluctantly, bound by duty, while Crotus carries out orders without question. They represent two kinds of servants, the unwilling and the unquestioning. Aeschylus masterfully sets the scene through dialogue. Crotus describes the place as the world's limit, an untrodden desolation, emphasizing its remoteness and harshness. References to jagged cliffs, the scorching sun, and the bitter cold of night reinforce the inhospitable nature of Prometheus's prison. When Prometheus finally speaks, he immediately invokes the natural world, the ocean, the earth, the wind, and the sun, as his only companions. Both Hephaestus and Prometheus mention the vast stretch of time he will endure in chains. The humans for whom he suffers will never see him. He is entirely alone. Aeschylus also employs dramatic irony to foreshadow events to come. Hephaestus states that the one who will free Prometheus has not yet been born, implying that no mortal is strong enough to do so. Yet, unbeknownst to him, this is literally true. Heracles, who will eventually release Prometheus, has not yet come into the world. Another instance of irony arises when Crotus taunts Prometheus, saying he will need foresight to escape his chains. His remark is meant as mockery, ridiculing Prometheus's inability to alter his fate. Yet, Prometheus's name itself means foresight, and as the play unfolds, it becomes clear that his foreknowledge is precisely what he relies on to secure his eventual liberation. Prometheus's crime is more complex than it first appears. While his primary offense is stealing fire and giving it to mortals, his true transgression runs deeper. As the dialogue reveals, Prometheus is also being punished for his love of humanity. Some myths even suggest that he created human beings, and in this play, he later reveals that he has taught them nearly everything of value. According to Hesiod, Zeus had planned to destroy humanity by demanding that the best parts of slaughtered animals be sacrificed to him. Prometheus, in an act of defiance, tricked Zeus by wrapping bones in fat, making them appear desirable, while ensuring that humans kept the meat for themselves. This open opposition to Zeus's authority is the root cause of his punishment. Furthermore, as Hephaestus points out, Prometheus's betrayal extends beyond mere sympathy for mortals. He has stolen fire, the divine symbol of power, and given it to those deemed unworthy. In doing so, he has not only defied Zeus, but also upset the cosmic balance. At the heart of the play is the struggle between intellect and brute force. Prometheus, the embodiment of wisdom and foresight, is physically overpowered by Zeus's enforcers. This is a crucial point, on which the entire play is based, so it is necessary to keep this in mind while watching the video. Prometheus is knowledge, future, progress, and intellect, bound by Zeus and his subordinates, who represent the forces of nature. This is not just a tale of gods, it is deeply sophisticated and symbolic. It is not about supernatural realms or imagination, it speaks about the nature of reality itself, and this is how we need to understand it. This is why, for example, when Zeus asked the best parts of animals for sacrifice, Prometheus tricked him and gave him fat and bones, that humans can keep the meat as food. It is because this is really happening, in reality. We are eating meat because Prometheus, as foresight, allowed us to see that meat is good for food, while bones are not, so we are throwing bones back to nature, to Zeus. In our modern times, everything is artificial, stories lost their meaning, everything is viewed literally, superficially. Oh, they believed in fairy tales and magic. It is all nonsense. I hate when people speak like this, so I wanted to point this out. The problem is not that they believed in nonsense. The problem is in our superficial understanding. It seems like Prometheus took away the power of imagination and understanding from today's modern generations, and I don't like it. Now let's get back to the content of the play. Crotus repeatedly emphasizes Prometheus's cunning, insisting that he be bound securely to prevent escape. Aeschylus also weaves in the theme of necessity and time. Mortals are described as creatures of a day, fleeting and insignificant compared to the gods. Yet even Zeus, though immortal, is not beyond the reach of fate. His own rise to power followed a cycle. Cronus overthrew Uranus, only to be overthrown by Zeus. As a titan, Prometheus belongs to the older ruling order, and his repeated references to Zeus's status as a new ruler hint at the instability of his reign. Prometheus, with his gift of prophecy, sees beyond Zeus's present dominance and understands that ultimate power lies not with Zeus, but with necessity. Even the gods are bound by fate, and time ensures that no ruler's power is absolute. At the close of his first monologue, Prometheus hears the sound of wings approaching. His prophetic insight makes this moment especially ominous. He knows that, in the future, Zeus will send an eagle to devour his liver. The recurring image of a threat from above reinforces his vulnerability. Throughout the play, figures descend from the sky, including the chorus, Oceanus, and Hermes, serving as constant reminders of Zeus's dominion. The sky, from which Zeus hurls his lightning bolts, stands in direct contrast to Prometheus's condition, chained and immobile, while others, whether allies or enemies, remain free to move. The Oceanids, daughters of Oceanus, arrive in winged chariots, drawn by the sound of clashing metal. Moved by the sight before them, they express their sorrow at Prometheus's suffering, their eyes filled with tears. They acknowledge that Olympus has new rulers, and that Zeus follows only his own laws, indifferent to those who came before him. Prometheus laments his fate, wishing he had been cast into the depths of Tartarus rather than left in plain sight, where other gods might mock his misery. The Oceanids, however, assure him that no one, except Zeus himself, could be cruel enough to laugh at his suffering. Despite his torment, Prometheus foretells a day when Zeus will find his own power threatened and will come seeking his aid. His words shock the chorus, who caution him against speaking too boldly. But Prometheus remains defiant, insisting that in the end, Zeus will have no choice but to make peace with him. Curious to understand the cause of Zeus's wrath, the Oceanids urge Prometheus to share his story. He recounts how he once sided with Zeus in the great war against the Titans, believing that guile, rather than brute strength, would determine the victor. Though Prometheus warned the Titans of this truth, they ignored both him and his mother's prophecy. Left with no alternative, Prometheus joined Zeus and helped secure his victory. But, like all true tyrants, Zeus does not trust even his allies. His plan to annihilate humanity was met with resistance from only one, Prometheus himself, who pitied humankind even more than he pitied his own fate. The chorus expresses their continued sympathy before asking if he did anything else to incur Zeus's wrath. Prometheus explains that he gave mortals hope, shielding them from the knowledge of their own doom. Then, as his final and greatest gift, he granted them fire. At this revelation, the chorus rebukes him, insisting that he has brought this punishment upon himself and urging him to find a way to escape his suffering. But Prometheus responds bitterly, pointing out that it is easy to offer advice from a place of safety. He fully acknowledges that he brought this fate upon himself, yet he does not regret his actions. Wishing to share more of his story, he invites the Oceanids to descend to the earth, and they willingly agree. This section explores the theme of friendship and its connection to pity, a crucial concept in the play. Earlier, in the exchange between Hephaestus and Crotus, this relationship was already evident. Hephaestus, bound to Prometheus by kinship and friendship, cannot help but feel pity for him, and he rebukes Crotus for his lack of compassion. Crotus, on the other hand, dismisses pity as meaningless. However, the arrival of the Oceanids proves otherwise. While Prometheus dreads the scorn of his enemies, he knows that his friends will grieve for him. Pity is portrayed as a noble virtue. After all, it was Prometheus's own pity for humanity that saved them. In contrast, those who lack pity, Zeus and his unthinking servants, are framed as tyrannical. Prometheus denounces Zeus not only for his cruelty, but for his inability to trust his friends. He accepts his suffering as a consequence of his own actions, yet he deems it unjust, for Zeus has violated the fundamental bonds of friendship. His tyranny is defined by this very absence of pity. Both Prometheus and the chorus emphasize that Zeus rules by laws of his own making, and any future reconciliation between them would require Zeus to forsake his arbitrary authority in favor of friendship. This section also introduces Prometheus's prophecy of Zeus's eventual downfall, which grants him a form of power that Zeus himself lacks. Though he is bound and suffering, Prometheus is certain that Zeus will one day be compelled to free him and make amends. His foreknowledge serves as a counterbalance to Zeus's brute strength. More than this, Prometheus boldly claims that he and Zeus will one day be friends. Given that friendship is a virtue Zeus has abandoned in his tyranny, Prometheus suggests that his own power, his knowledge of the future, will ultimately restore harmony to the cosmos by reinstating friendship as a guiding principle. He thus sees his suffering in a measured way. In time, it will lead to the right order of things. Yet, Prometheus's rage against Zeus is undeniable, and Aeschylus deliberately highlights his extreme condemnation of the god's rule. When the Oceanids inquire about his punishment, Prometheus delays his explanation. Rather than immediately recounting Zeus's grievance against him, he first speaks of his own outrage, Zeus's betrayal of friendship. This shift in focus reveals Prometheus's priorities. He is consumed by his resentment and treats his own provocation of Zeus as insignificant. After listing the many gifts he bestowed upon humanity, he finally mentions stealing fire, but in such a casual manner that it seems unimportant. When the Oceanids suggest that his actions were wrong, he dismisses their concerns, arguing that it is easy for those who are not suffering to judge. Aeschylus ensures that the audience's attention remains fixed on Zeus's tyranny rather than Prometheus's transgression. The Oceanids, while sympathetic, also serve as a voice of caution. They recognize Zeus's injustice, but believe that Prometheus should seek reconciliation rather than intensifying his defiance. Prometheus is far more than a mere bringer of fire. His gifts to humanity extend beyond physical survival. He has also granted them blind hope and shielded them from the knowledge of their own deaths. As an immortal, Prometheus can endure his suffering with the certainty of his eventual vindication, but for mortals, the awareness of their inevitable demise would render life unbearable. The moment one perceives the limits of their existence, life itself risks losing meaning. Hope, in contrast, allows people to strive toward goals without knowing whether they can be achieved. It serves as a psychological necessity, a driving force for progress. Fire, as Hephaestus and Prometheus both note, is the foundation of art and technology, a practical tool for advancement. By bestowing both hope and fire, Prometheus has enabled humanity to move forward. This perspective stands in stark contrast to an older Greek worldview. Hesiod described history as a gradual decline from the paradise of the Golden Age down through the Silver, Bronze, and finally the wretched Iron Age. While Aeschylus does not outright reject the idea of decline, he presents an alternative vision, one in which hope and technological advancement allow humanity to continually improve their condition. Prometheus's account of the war between Zeus and the Titans also reveals an important aspect of divine affairs, the politics of power. His support for Zeus was not an act of friendship but a strategic alliance, and so Zeus's betrayal is not so much a violation of personal loyalty as a political maneuver. Initially, Prometheus aligned himself with the Titans, but when they dismissed his counsel, he chose the winning side. His mother, Earth, had foretold that intelligence, not brute force, would secure victory. The Titans, refusing to heed this wisdom, were defeated, while Prometheus's guidance helped Zeus triumph and establish his rule. However, just as Prometheus abandoned the Titans, Zeus later abandoned him when it suited his interests. This political nature of divine rule also helps explain a key tension in the play. Zeus appears unyielding, punishing Prometheus with sheer force, yet the trilogy likely ends in reconciliation. Some scholars argue that Zeus, as an eternal god, cannot change or grow wiser. Yet if Zeus does not evolve, how is a future friendship with Prometheus possible? The political model provides an answer. Zeus does not need to change. He simply needs to act in his own best interest. Just as he once allied with Prometheus to secure his throne, he will do so again when a greater threat arises. Reconciliation does not require personal growth, only political calculation. While Zeus embodies force and Prometheus represents intellect, the dynamic is not so simplistic. Prometheus's intelligence was instrumental in Zeus's rise to power, suggesting that neither raw strength nor cunning alone is sufficient for dominance. Pitting them against each other leads only to destruction. Instead, intelligence serves as the decisive factor in shifting the balance of power. This is particularly significant because Prometheus's greatest gift to humanity, beyond fire and hope, is intelligence itself. By empowering humans with reason and ingenuity, he has given them the ability to resist the forces of nature and carve out their own destiny. Oceanus, the Titan who personifies the vast ocean encircling the world, arrives on a flying beast. Without hesitation, he expresses his friendship and sympathy for Prometheus, offering to intercede with Zeus on his behalf. Oceanus advises Prometheus to remain silent and stop provoking the god, suggesting that compliance might ease his suffering. However, Prometheus firmly rejects this offer, convinced that Oceanus can achieve nothing by speaking on his behalf. When Oceanus persists, Prometheus refuses again, unwilling to see another suffer because of him. He already bears the weight of his brother's suffering under Zeus's rule and does not wish to add to it. Oceanus argues that words have the power to heal, but Prometheus counters that words are only effective when spoken at the right time. Intervening now, he warns, will only draw Zeus's wrath upon them both. Accepting this, Oceanus departs. Once again, the chorus laments Prometheus's suffering. They mourn not only for him, but for the ancient world that existed before Zeus, a world now subjected to the new ruler's tyranny. They recall another Titan who shares Prometheus's fate, Atlas, condemned to hold up the heavens. In response, Prometheus recounts all he has done for humanity. He taught them numbers and language, enabling them to remember and build upon their knowledge. He revealed the paths of the stars and introduced the art of navigation. He harnessed animals for labor, relieving humans of burdensome toil. He bestowed medicine to heal the sick and unveiled the mysteries of prophecy, teaching them to interpret dreams, birds, sacrifices, and fire. Lastly, he taught them to extract metals from the earth, laying the foundation for all human craftsmanship. In short, he claims responsibility for every art and skill that has allowed humanity to flourish. The chorus suggests that Prometheus gave too much to humanity without considering his own well-being. Yet Prometheus accepts his suffering as inevitable, bound by the same necessity that governs all, including Zeus himself. He comes close to revealing a secret prophecy, one that holds the key to his eventual freedom, but stops short, explaining that only by keeping it hidden can he ensure his own release. The chorus, loyal to Zeus, affirms their commitment to the divine order and criticizes Prometheus for aiding creatures who cannot return the favor. Finally, they contrast their current sorrowful songs with those they once sang in joy at his marriage to their sister, Hesione, a reminder of how far he has fallen. The exchange between Oceanus and Prometheus further reveals the nature of Zeus's servants and the complexities of Prometheus's character. Oceanus's offer to help Prometheus seems insincere, and Prometheus, recognizing this, responds with sarcasm and quickly dismisses him. Oceanus does not even dismount from his flying beast, and as he departs, he remarks on his animal's eagerness to return home. His motivation for offering aid likely stems from kinship. Prometheus is both a fellow Titan and his son-in-law, but Oceanus is ultimately unwilling to challenge Zeus. He urges Prometheus to be less defiant and departs as soon as his offer is declined, revealing his cautious loyalty to Zeus. While he may not serve willingly, he serves nonetheless, illustrating the political nature of divine interactions. Oceanus understands the limits of his power and, though he may disapprove of Zeus's severity, values his place in the established order. Prometheus, on the other hand, is notably reserved in his conversation with Oceanus compared to his openness with the chorus. He dismisses Oceanus's intervention as futile without divulging the prophecy he holds. To dissuade Oceanus from getting involved, He reminds him of Zeus's overwhelming power by citing the imprisonment of Atlas and the downfall of Typho. While Prometheus claims he wishes to protect Oceanus from unnecessary risk, his willingness to confide more in the Oceanids suggests otherwise. More likely, he distrusts the politically minded Oceanus and wishes to send him away. Oceanus, attempting to reason with him, compares words to medicine, believing persuasion might appeal to Prometheus's intellect. However, Prometheus rejects this, stating that remedies must be administered at the right time, though he does not reveal when that time will come. When Oceanus offers himself as a teacher, Prometheus sarcastically turns the remark back on him. Though they part on amicable terms, there is a strong suggestion that Oceanus's offer was merely a matter of tact, and that Prometheus adeptly moderates his responses according to the situation. Prometheus's list of gifts to humanity highlights several significant elements. While he briefly mentions language and mathematics, he predominantly focuses on material contributions. His list follows a structured pattern. Both sections begin by identifying a fundamental human need, followed by an account of how he fulfilled it. The first list starts with the need for shelter and guidance, progressing through advancements such as agriculture, numbers, husbandry, and shipbuilding, presenting a vision of human progress. The second list follows a similar pattern, beginning with medicine, then moving to divination, and finally metallurgy. The order of metals, bronze, iron, silver, and gold, mirrors Hesiod's ages of man. However, whereas Hesiod described a decline from the Golden Age to the Bronze, Aeschylus reverses this sequence to depict human advancement rather than decay. Within each list, Prometheus places particular emphasis on certain contributions. In the second list, he dwells on divination, a fitting focus given his own prophetic abilities. More striking, however, is his emphasis on the domestication of animals from the first list, which stands out given the brevity with which he mentions writing and mathematics. The Oceanids react coldly when they reproach Prometheus for aiding humanity, but in Greek thought, their response is logical. The original term for kindness is closer in meaning to favor, which in Greek culture was understood as part of a reciprocal system. It was expected that favors would only be granted to those who could repay them in some way. Prometheus's actions violate this norm, setting him apart from the typical divine order. Among the gods, friendship is often a matter of political necessity. Zeus allied with Prometheus when it suited his rise to power, just as Prometheus sided with Zeus when the Titans refused to listen to him. Prometheus, no less than Zeus, forms and dissolves alliances according to circumstance. What makes Prometheus unique is his decision to help humanity despite their inability to reciprocate, an act that defies the usual logic of divine relationships. The chorus contrasts their joyful hymns at Prometheus's wedding with their present sorrowful laments, marking the shift from a time of happiness to one of suffering. This change coincides with Zeus's ascent to power, which represents a generational conflict. Though Zeus is a younger god, his rule mirrors that of a stern, patriarchal figure. Prometheus, though from the older generation, symbolizes progress in opposition to Zeus's static authority. The implication is that happiness requires a balance between tradition and progress. A total rejection of the past leads only to hardship. Finally, the chorus's remarks subtly foreshadow the next phase of the drama. Their reference to Prometheus's marriage, particularly the comment that his bride was of his own race, may seem oddly placed at first. However, it sets up the arrival of Io, whose tragic fate demonstrates the consequences of an ill-fated union. Though the Oceanids are unaware of Io's imminent entrance, Aeschylus skillfully uses their words to establish a thematic contrast between Prometheus's marriage and the disastrous relationship we are about to witness. Io enters the stage wearing the horns of a cow, tormented by her relentless suffering. She pleads for answers, questioning where she is, why the ghost of Argos haunts her, and why Zeus punishes her with the sting of a gadfly. Prometheus immediately recognizes her and addresses her by name, demonstrating his knowledge of her tragic wanderings. Curious about his identity and the reason for his punishment, Io asks Prometheus to reveal his story. After he complies, she begs him to tell her what lies ahead in her journey. Before Prometheus can respond, the chorus interrupts, requesting that Io first recount how her ordeal began. She reveals that she was once plagued by dreams in which a voice commanded her to surrender her virginity to Zeus. When her father, Inachus, consulted an oracle, he was warned that he must exile his daughter or incur the wrath of the god. Obeying the divine warning, Inachus cast Io out, and she was immediately transformed, both in body and mind, into a cow. Tormented by the ceaseless pursuit of a gadfly and the watchful eyes of the shepherd Argos, she has been wandering the earth ever since. Horrified by her tale, the chorus expresses their deep sympathy. Prometheus, in turn, foretells more of Io's journey, predicting her path eastward through Asia, where she must evade various hostile peoples. Despairing, Io asks what reason she has to continue living, but Prometheus reminds her that, unlike him, she will eventually find relief. His suffering is eternal, while hers will end. He then shares a prophecy. A son will be born from her lineage who will one day overthrow Zeus. When Io asks if Zeus can avoid this fate, Prometheus explains that his downfall can only be prevented if one of Io's descendants frees him. Prometheus proceeds to describe the remainder of Io's wanderings. She will travel through Africa, encountering strange peoples and monstrous creatures before Zeus finally restores her to human form. In time, she will bear a child through Zeus's touch, giving rise to a powerful lineage. Among her descendants will be the Danarids, 50 women who, rather than marry their cousins, choose to slay them on their wedding night. Only one, swayed by love, will spare her husband, and from their union will come the kings of Argos. Ultimately, one of their descendants, the famed archer Heracles, will be the one to break Prometheus's chains. As Prometheus finishes speaking, Io succumbs once more to madness, overcome by the relentless torment of the gadfly, and she runs off in agony. The Oceanids mourn her tragic fate, lamenting the dangers of unions between mortals and gods. Fearing the wrath of Olympus, they voice a fervent hope that none of the gods will ever take an interest in them, for they see no possible escape from Zeus's power. Aeschylus uses Io's entrance to highlight the deep connection between her fate and that of Prometheus. When Io enters, she laments her suffering in 5 verses, which Prometheus responds to in kind with 5 of his own. Through their conversation, we learn first of the prophecy of Zeus's eventual downfall, which will benefit both of them, and then of the prophecy that Io's descendant will be the one to free Prometheus. In many ways, Prometheus and Io are bound together by fate. While Prometheus suffers under Zeus's hatred, Io suffers because of Zeus's love. As a tyrant who rules arbitrarily, Zeus harms anyone in his path, and both characters bear the consequences of his oppressive rule. Io recounts her story, leaving Hera out of the picture. She details how Zeus attempted to seduce her in dreams, how he had her cast out of her father's home, and how she was transformed into a cow and pursued by Argos and the gadfly. Though she mentions these figures, she is vague when recounting her suffering, especially about the details of her transformation. This vagueness may reflect her own mental state, now clouded by her cow form. However, Aeschylus deliberately shifts responsibility for Io's plight away from Hera, despite her role in sending Argos and the gadfly. By focusing on Zeus, Aeschylus makes it clear that he is the ultimate tyrant who causes Io's suffering, just as he is responsible for Prometheus's punishment. The travelogues detailing Io's wanderings serve a dual purpose. They locate the action both in space and time. As Io journeys east and south, the audience is reminded of the known world. Scholars believe that the sequel, Prometheus Unbound, follows a similar structure, featuring Prometheus revealing the future travels of Heracles to the west and north. Together, these journeys encircle the entire known world, setting the stage for the conflict between Zeus and Prometheus. Furthermore, the story of Io's journey would have held specific significance for Greek audiences, given the historical and geographical references. Prometheus explains that Io's wanderings are the reason for the names Bosporus and the Ionian Sea, places familiar to the audience. Her descendants would eventually rule over Argos, a city with a well-known history, and one of her descendants, the hero Heracles, would become central to Greek myth. By tying his mythological story to familiar place names and historical figures, Aeschylus makes the tale of the gods more relevant and immediate for his audience. This travelogue also illustrates the dual nature of Prometheus's gifts to humanity. While Prometheus is capable of advising others, his gifts cannot free him from his torment. The chorus compares him to a doctor who has fallen sick. His wisdom and knowledge cannot help him escape his chains. He must wait for the right moment, even as his gifts to humanity remain the cause of his suffering. These gifts, though beneficial, also have dangerous consequences. For instance, Io learns of Zeus's lust for her through dreams, a form of divination that Prometheus taught to humanity. She is exiled by her father, following the command of an oracle, and she is pursued by threats and weapons, all stemming from the technology Prometheus introduced to humanity. Thus, the very gifts that benefit humankind also have the potential to bring harm. Prometheus's dialogue with Io illustrates a recurring theme of procrastination, as he repeatedly delays revealing key information. When Io asks why he has been punished, Prometheus initially postpones his response, claiming that he has just finished expressing his complaints. His attempt to explain Io's future is also interrupted by the chorus, which asks about her past, prompting Prometheus to pause the narrative of her wanderings twice. Prometheus hesitates numerous times, torn between speaking and remaining silent. At first, he refuses to respond to his torturers, concealing his prophecy for a period. The revelation of Zeus's future wife is kept secret until Prometheus's release, demonstrating that certain truths must be postponed for a specific outcome. This delay in Prometheus's disclosure of Io's future mirrors his own situation, where, after much hesitation, he will eventually be reconciled with Zeus, just as Io's suffering will come to an end. Io's frantic thrashing, as she is stung by the gadfly, sharply contrasts with Prometheus's stillness. Both are slaves, though one can move and the other cannot. In this sense, freedom is not solely about physical movement. Prometheus, though bound, is freer in his mind. Io's plight, however, serves as a stark example of Zeus's absolute power. He is not content merely to punish with lightning or chains, but can transform humans into animals, as seen in Io's metamorphosis. The figures of Io, Atlas, Typho, and Prometheus all symbolize the metaphorical yoke under which Zeus ensnares his victims. Prometheus's prophetic abilities are often depicted as inconsistent, and this section offers a notable example. Earlier in the play, Prometheus confidently predicted that one day he and Zeus would reconcile, but here he asserts with equal certainty that Zeus will be overthrown by a future descendant. When Io presses him further, Prometheus admits that Zeus might avoid this fate if he is freed. It becomes clear that, while Prometheus can foresee the future, his knowledge is not absolute. The future is not determined solely by fate. It depends on a crucial decision that Prometheus must make. He holds the power to choose which outcome will come to pass, Zeus's downfall or a reconciliation. In this moment, Prometheus's prophecy becomes more forceful and decisive, driven by his desire for Zeus's downfall. His character shifts in response to Io's presence, and his earlier ambivalence gives way to a defiant certainty about Zeus's eventual defeat. The final ode of the chorus marks a distinct shift in tone from the earlier verses before Io's entrance. Previously, the Oceanids had spoken of Prometheus's hopeful future, including his marriage to their sister, but now they caution against marriages between those of unequal rank. Their sympathy for Prometheus, while still present, is tempered by a growing fear of Zeus. The chorus no longer expresses reverence for Zeus. Instead, they voice concern about his dangerous temper and lust. The change is subtle but significant. The Oceanids have been affected by Io's arrival and her story, and they now express a greater awareness of the harm Zeus can inflict on others. Prometheus prophesies that, despite Zeus's current confidence, he will one day be overthrown by a far more powerful offspring, one who will surpass Zeus in strength and wield more formidable weapons. This event will fulfill the curse laid by Cronus, Zeus's deposed father. Prometheus claims that only he has the power to prevent Zeus's eventual downfall. While the chorus suggests that this might merely be Prometheus's wishful thinking, Prometheus insists that his prophecy will come true. When the chorus warns that Zeus might respond with even harsher punishments, Prometheus defiantly declares that the Oceanids may worship whomever they choose, but he himself is prepared to endure any further tortures. Hermes, Zeus's messenger, enters and demands that Prometheus reveal the secret of Zeus's dangerous marriage. Prometheus, unafraid of the new gods, refuses to speak. Hermes chastises Prometheus, accusing him of being stubborn, but Prometheus retorts that he would rather remain chained to the rock than live as a slave to Zeus. Hermes accuses Prometheus of lacking wisdom, but Prometheus mocks him, stating that no threats can convince him to save Zeus. Only his release would make him speak. Hermes threatens Prometheus with an even worse fate. He will be entombed in the rock and cast into Tartarus, where an eagle will feast on his liver every day. This punishment will continue until another god agrees to take Prometheus's place in Tartarus. The chorus suggests that Hermes's argument makes sense, urging Prometheus to set aside his stubbornness, but Prometheus counters that there is no shame in suffering at the hands of an enemy. He calls on the earth to shake and take him into Tartarus amidst bolts of lightning. Hermes, calling Prometheus mad, warns the chorus to leave before they become victims of the coming storm. The Oceanids, however, refuse to abandon Prometheus, declaring that betraying a friend is the lowest act. Hermes responds that they should not blame Zeus for their troubles, as they have brought this fate upon themselves. Prometheus, in turn, describes the storm raging around him, calling upon earth and heaven to witness his suffering. In this final, climactic section, the conflict between Zeus and Prometheus is distilled to its most fundamental elements. The themes of Prometheus's love for humanity and his theft of fire are largely absent. Instead, the conflict now centers on Prometheus's refusal to submit to Zeus's arbitrary laws. Zeus is depicted as ruling solely through threats, while Prometheus's power lies in his defiance of those threats. Prometheus holds a powerful weapon against Zeus, his knowledge of the future marriage that will bring about Zeus's downfall. However, he will not reveal this knowledge unless Zeus ends his threats and offers friendship. Prometheus responds only to friendship, not to threats, while Zeus rules by threats and disregards friendship. Both figures are extreme and unyielding in their respective positions, highlighting the essential nature of their conflict. Prometheus's prophecies, like the conflict, have escalated to an extreme. Though he has kept his temper in check thus far, he now loudly declares that Zeus will be destroyed. This proclamation triggers Hermes's visit and the subsequent punishment. Prometheus has reached a point where he chooses to intensify the conflict rather than passively waiting for it to resolve. Over the course of the play, Prometheus has moved through 3 stages in his prophetic declarations. Initially, he mentioned his secret knowledge of Zeus's marriage as a means to secure his eventual release and reconciliation with Zeus. In the presence of Io, he spoke of both his deliverance and Zeus's downfall, without alluding to reconciliation. Now, in this final section, Prometheus speaks only of Zeus's destruction, almost completely disregarding any potential for reconciliation. The oddity of Prometheus's prophecy, which now seems clearly false since Zeus was not ultimately overthrown by his offspring, can be explained by his emotional state. In a sense, Prometheus is only human. He perceives 2 possible outcomes in the future and chooses to fixate on one based on the intensity of his anger. At this peak moment of anger, he insists on a future in which Zeus is destroyed. Reconciliation is mentioned only twice in this section, but in both cases it is not framed as part of prophecy. The first mention occurs sarcastically in response to Hermes, where Prometheus states he would gladly return kindness for kindness. Since Hermes does not treat reconciliation as a real possibility, this statement is clearly a mockery of Hermes's attempts to elicit information. The second mention arises when Prometheus insists that only his release can make him speak. Threats are futile. Again, this is not a suggestion of reconciliation as a future event, but a contrast between Zeus's approach, demanding obedience, and Prometheus's, requiring friendship. In his anger over Io's suffering and Hermes's arrogance, Prometheus seems to have abandoned any hope of reconciliation and now awaits only Zeus's downfall. This shift in perspective is reflected in Prometheus's language. He transitions from using the conditional tense to the future tense when speaking of Zeus's destruction. When he says, "Time in its aging course teaches all things," Prometheus is not suggesting that Zeus will learn friendship, but rather that Zeus will eventually understand suffering through personal experience. Prometheus's perspective on his imprisonment becomes particularly striking when he compares himself to Hermes. He says, "When I set my misfortune against your slavery, I would not change." Prometheus emphasizes that while Hermes is free to move, he remains a slave because he obeys Zeus without question. Unlike Zeus's other servants, Oceanus and Hephaestus, Hermes cannot experience pity or friendship because his actions and thoughts are entirely aligned with Zeus's commands. This situation echoes the criticism Hephaestus expresses at the play's start, when he laments that in Crotus, Zeus's will is perfectly fulfilled. In you the command of Zeus has its perfect fulfillment. In you there is nothing to stand in its way. The same cannot be said of Prometheus, who defies Zeus's will. The Oceanids have pointed out that Prometheus's true crime is that he did not tremble at the name of Zeus. Your mind was yours, not his. Prometheus's sin, then, lies in his ability to think independently. His intelligence directly conflicts with Zeus's demand for absolute obedience, and this is what leads to his punishment. Hermes, however, seems to recognize Prometheus's situation when he accuses him of being a colt new broken, with the bit clenched in its teeth, fighting against the reins. Hermes understands that Prometheus is resisting control, but he views it as a mistake. In his view, it is far wiser to serve the greatest power, Zeus, than to challenge it. This view reflects the earlier sentiment expressed by Crotus, who states that there is no freedom but that of the gods, for only Zeus is free. Zeus's servants are aware they are not free, but their fear of disobeying Zeus compels them to align their thoughts entirely with his orders. In contrast, Prometheus shows that one can retain freedom even in physical bondage if one preserves the freedom of thought. Ironically, Hermes is blind to his own situation. He criticizes Prometheus, saying, "Obstinacy standing alone is the weakest of all things in one whose mind is not possessed by wisdom." The irony here is that this statement applies more aptly to Zeus than to Prometheus. Zeus is obstinate without wisdom, as he refuses to release Prometheus, even though doing so would be his best chance for survival. Prometheus, on the other hand, has only his wisdom to cling to. Zeus represents strength without wisdom, while Prometheus embodies wisdom without strength. The resolution of their conflict can only come when strength and wisdom are reconciled between the two, though, in this final section of the play, Aeschylus seems to make reconciliation increasingly unlikely, intensifying the conflict rather than resolving it. Aeschylus's genius lies in his ability to craft dramatic reversals. He sets up a conflict that seems insurmountable, only to hint at a potential resolution, which makes the irony of the play all the more potent. The audience, knowing that a resolution will ultimately come, recognizes the irony in the characters' statements. When Zeus's servants accuse Prometheus of lacking wisdom or foresight, the joke is on them. Prometheus's wisdom, although leading to his suffering, ultimately reveals the limitations of Zeus's power. Prometheus acknowledges his tragic flaws, such as hubris and lack of self-discipline, but instead of attempting to rid himself of them, he dismisses them with sarcasm and wit in several exchanges. When Hermes accuses him of madness, Prometheus cleverly replies that if madness means hating one's enemies, then he is indeed mad. He turns his hubris against Hermes's accusation, stating that it is only fitting to have hubris when speaking to those who already have too much of it. One of the most telling moments of his sarcastic wit comes when Hermes claims Prometheus lacks self-discipline. The Greek word Hermes uses also means sound judgment, and Prometheus immediately quips that if he had learned sound judgment, he wouldn't be speaking with a servant. Earlier, when the chorus suggested he had erred, Prometheus responded that he had erred willingly, an oxymoron that further highlights his defiance. Unlike the typical tragic hero who denies their flaws, Prometheus accepts his hubris with humor, believing that the flaws lie not in himself, but in the flawed world ruled by Zeus. He sees no fault in his actions. It is Zeus's order that is wrong. Throughout the play, the chorus serves as a morally neutral voice, advising the hero to reconsider his excesses. The Oceanids, initially serving this function, try to change Prometheus's mind but fail. At the end, they defy Hermes's command and choose to stay with Prometheus. They declare that betrayal of friendship is the most heinous crime. This shift in the chorus's stance solidifies Prometheus's values, as they now champion friendship over fear of Zeus's power. The Oceanids' decision to stay with Prometheus, despite his inability to help them, mirrors his earlier actions when he aided humanity, offering help without expecting anything in return. Finally, an interesting contrast emerges between Zeus and Prometheus. The play begins with the deafening noise of Zeus's servants chaining Prometheus, and the Oceanids remark that it was the noise that brought them there. The play then comes full circle with the noise created by Zeus's messenger, who brings storms and earthquakes to torment Prometheus. Zeus represents chaos and noise, while Prometheus stands in stark contrast. Instead of relying on physical force, Prometheus uses words, reason and thought, as his means of resistance. This contrast between noise and speech symbolizes the difference between brute power and intellectual thought, a distinction that ultimately defines the play's resolution. Aeschylus was born in 525 BC in Eleusis, a place renowned for its mystical rituals dedicated to Demeter, the earth goddess. Many biographers suggest that this early exposure to mysticism influenced the themes of his plays. According to legend, Dionysus, the god of wine and drama, appeared to Aeschylus in a dream and urged him to write tragedies. At just 17, Aeschylus heeded the call and began writing. Much of his life was spent in Athens, where he witnessed significant political and social changes that likely shaped his work. The themes of rebellion against tyranny and the eventual establishment of democracy in his plays reflect his first-hand experiences of the collapse of tyranny and the rise of Athens's constitution. Aeschylus also fought in the Persian Wars, where he lost his brother in the final battle, an event he later memorialized in his play The Persians. His tragedies also mirror the cultural shift in Athens as new scientific and philosophical ideas began to challenge the traditional belief in the gods. Aeschylus passed away as a respected poet, though his death was rather unusual. An eagle, mistaking his bald head for a rock, dropped a turtle on it in an attempt to crack it open. While it's unclear if the turtle shell cracked, Aeschylus's head certainly did. Aeschylus is often credited with the invention of drama. The structure of modern theatre owes much to his innovations. Before Aeschylus, drama consisted of a single actor delivering monologues while the chorus provided commentary. Aeschylus revolutionized the form by introducing a second actor, enabling interaction and creating the possibility for dramatic conflict. He also established a professional cast of actors, integrated dialogue between the chorus and characters, and added elaborate costumes and stage designs. Throughout his career, he wrote over 80 plays, of which only 7 have survived in full, preserved by ancient grammarians who considered these works exemplary for teaching young students. Among the Aeschylean tragedies preserved for us, Prometheus Bound stands out as one of the most significant for the intellectual history of Western civilization due to its rebellious spirit and faith in human progress. However, it also presents the greatest number of challenges for scholars. The foremost issue is the question of authorship. For centuries, Greek scholars have relied on 3rd century BC historiographers who attributed the play to Aeschylus. Yet, recent analysis has revealed substantial differences in subject matter, character portrayal, setting, meter, and style compared to Aeschylus's other works. Some scholars even argue that certain linguistic and philosophical elements in the play were not available to playwrights before 456 BC, the year Aeschylus died. While some differences can be explained, the sheer number of discrepancies suggests that the authorship issue cannot be dismissed. A more plausible explanation might be that the play was written by a follower of Aeschylus, or perhaps Aeschylus wrote parts of it, with a later playwright completing it. Another challenge is the lack of information about the other plays in the Prometheus trilogy. Greek tragedians typically wrote trilogies for festivals, and it is generally assumed that Prometheus Bound was the first part of such a trilogy. We know the titles of 2 other plays, Prometheus Unbound and Prometheus the Firebringer, which almost certainly followed Prometheus Bound. This suggests that the traditional interpretation of the play should be reconsidered. Historically, Prometheus Bound has been viewed as a call for rebellion against an unjust God. Christian writers have condemned it, while atheists and romantics have often turned it into a manifesto. However, both sides may have rushed to conclusions. A playwright of Aeschylus's caliber would not have left the story unresolved, with Prometheus still in open defiance of Zeus. Foreshadowing within the play itself indicates that a resolution and reconciliation between the 2 enemies was anticipated. Moreover, it was widely known in ancient Greece that Zeus was never defeated by his offspring, as Prometheus predicts, implying that Prometheus must have given him some warning. Fragments of Prometheus Unbound suggest that Zeus softened and released the Titans from their imprisonment. In this later play, Heracles appears and kills the eagle tormenting Prometheus. This indicates that a reconciliation between Zeus and Prometheus must have taken place, aligning with Prometheus's earlier prophecies. Greek morality also demands this reconciliation, as the Greeks opposed extremes, and tragic heroes were often doomed by their excessive pride. This suggests that neither Zeus nor Prometheus could have remained filled with hatred or pride at the conclusion of the trilogy. Ultimately, the Prometheus story is one of rebellion and humanity's struggle with nature through perseverance and intelligence. However, it must also be a tale of maturation, reconciliation, and the restoration of balance between the gods, the Titans, and humanity.